The bass thrummed through my chest like a second heartbeat, vibrating the soles of my worn sneakers against the sticky bar floor. I'd been on my feet for 7 hours straight, and the ache had spread from my heels to my lower back, settling there like an old friend I'd learned to ignore. The dim, amber lighting of the velvet room cast everything in shades of gold and shadow. Expensive enough to feel exclusive, dark enough to hide secrets. I wiped down the mahogany counter for what felt like the 100th time tonight. The sharp scent of lemon cleaner mixing with top-shelf whiskey and designer perfume. Another vodka tonic, a businessman slurred at me, his third tie of the evening, metaphorically speaking. They all blurred together after a while, these men in their tailored suits and loosened collars, trying to impress women who cost more per hour than I made in a week. I nodded, reaching for the bottle, when Marcus caught my eye from the other end of the bar. Marcus was harmless, a regular who came in every Thursday, always ordering the same craft beer, always leaving a decent tip. He had kind eyes, the sort that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and a self-deprecating humor that made the endless shift feel slightly less suffocating. Tonight he was attempting to fold a cocktail napkin into some sort of origami crane, failing spectacularly. "I think you just made an accordion," I called over, unable to suppress a grin. "It's abstract art," he protested, holding up the mangled paper with mock pride. "You wouldn't understand my vision," I laughed. Actually laughed, the sound surprising even myself. It had been weeks since anything felt genuinely funny, since the weight of overdue rent and my mother's medical bills hadn't pressed down on my chest like a physical thing. For just a moment, the knot between my shoulder blades loosened. "That's the worst swan I've ever seen," I teased, measuring vodka into a glass. "Swan? This is clearly a dragon." The laugh bubbled up again, lighter this time, and I shook my head as I added tonic and lime. The simple exchange felt like oxygen after holding my breath underwater. Marcus wasn't trying to impress me or get something from me. He was just there. Uncomplicated. Safe. I slid the businessman his drink and returned to Marcus, leaning against the bar with my elbows on the wood. A dragon with wings that looked like... The temperature in the room dropped. I felt it before I understood it. A shift in the air. A sudden thickness that made my next breath catch in my throat. The conversations around us didn't stop exactly, but they muted, as if someone had turned down the volume on the entire world. My skin prickled with awareness. Every nerve suddenly alert to a presence I couldn't yet see. The crowd near the entrance parted, not obviously. Not like they were shoved aside, but they moved nonetheless. A subtle rearrangement of bodies that created a clear path through the Friday night crush. My fingers tightened on the edge of the bar, though I didn't know why. Some instinct, perhaps. Some animal part of my brain recognizing a predator before my conscious mind caught up. Then I saw him. He moved through the velvet room like he owned it. Which, I would later learn, he did. Everything about him commanded attention without demanding it. The charcoal suit that probably cost more than my entire year's salary, cut so precisely it seemed painted onto his frame. Dark hair styled with deliberate casualness, the kind of perfection that required effort to look effortless. But it was his face that made my breath stall. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from marble, and eyes so dark they appeared black in the bar's amber glow. He was young, maybe 30 at most, but he carried himself with the authority of someone much older, someone dangerous. 2 men flanked him, thick-necked and alert, their eyes constantly scanning the room. They wore suits too, but theirs were clearly functional, designed to hide whatever they carried beneath. Security. The kind that didn't ask questions, just acted. The stranger's gaze swept across the bar with clinical precision, cataloging every face, every exit, every potential threat. This wasn't someone who enjoyed nightlife. This was someone conducting business, always calculating, always 3 steps ahead. And then his eyes found mine. The impact was physical. My stomach dropped, my pulse kicked into a gallop, and every instinct screamed at me to look away. But I couldn't. His gaze held mine with an intensity that felt like a hand around my throat. Not squeezing, just there. Present. Inescapable. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful. Elegant, precise, and absolutely lethal. His attention shifted slightly, moving past me to Marcus, who was still holding his paper dragon, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere. The stranger's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a muscle jumping beneath that flawless skin. His eyes, God, those eyes, narrowed just a fraction. Then he was moving toward us. Each step was measured, purposeful. The crowd continued to part without seeming to notice they were doing it. His security followed at a respectful distance, close enough to intervene, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. The scent reached me before he did, bergamot and cedar, expensive and masculine, undercut with something darker, gunpowder maybe, or just danger itself if danger had a smell. My hands were suddenly trembling. I pressed them flat against the bar, trying to steady myself, trying to understand why every cell in my body was screaming at me to run. He stopped directly in front of me, barely 3 feet of mahogany separating us. Up close, he was even more devastating. A kind of beauty that felt almost cruel in its perfection. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, the only imperfection, and somehow it made him more attractive, more real, more terrifying. "Why are you smiling at him?" His voice was quiet, dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that made you lean in to hear, that demanded attention without raising in volume. It rolled over me like smoke, cultured and smooth, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't place. Italian, maybe, or simply the result of private schools and old money. But it was the words themselves that made my blood run cold. Not, "Can I get a drink?" Not, "Are you busy?" Just straight to an accusation wrapped in a question, delivered with the casual certainty of someone who expected answers, someone who wasn't used to being denied anything. I blinked, my mind scrambling to catch up. What? His gaze hadn't left my face. He didn't blink, didn't look away, just studied me with an intensity that made my skin flush. "You were smiling at him," he repeated, each word precisely enunciated. He tilted his head slightly toward Marcus, though his eyes never wavered from mine. Why? The possessiveness in his tone was unmistakable, but that was insane. I'd never seen this man before in my life. I would have remembered, God knows I would have remembered, someone who looked like him, who moved like him, who made the air itself feel heavier with his presence. He's just a customer, I managed, hating how small my voice sounded. We were talking. I was being friendly. It's part of the job. Something flickered in those dark eyes. Not anger, exactly. Something more complex, more dangerous. Friendly, he repeated as if tasting the word, as if he found it lacking. One of his guards shifted slightly, and I caught the unmistakable bulge of a shoulder holster beneath his jacket. My mouth went dry. This wasn't just some jealous boyfriend or territorial regular. This was something else entirely, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Look, I don't know what you think," I started, trying to inject some strength into my voice, trying to pretend I wasn't terrified. "You don't know me," he interrupted, his tone still soft, still devastatingly calm. "But I know you, Arya." My name in his mouth felt like an invasion, like he'd reached inside my chest and wrapped his hand around my heart. Because I hadn't told him my name, hadn't said a word about who I was. He'd known before he walked over here. He'd known before he even entered the bar. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the bar harder, my knuckles going white. "How do you work here 5 nights a week," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "Tuesday through Saturday, 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Riverside, 3rd floor, corner unit. Your mother is in Mercy General, room 4-12. Stage 3. The treatments aren't working as well as they'd hoped." Each word was a hammer blow, each detail a violation. He knew things he shouldn't know, things he had no right to know, things that proved this wasn't a chance encounter or a case of mistaken identity. This was intentional, calculated, planned. "You take the bus because your car died 6 months ago and you can't afford to fix it," he went on, his voice never rising, never losing that terrible calm. "You're 3 months behind on rent. Your landlord is threatening eviction. You eat 1 meal a day, usually whatever the kitchen here throws away at closing. You haven't bought yourself anything new in over a year." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing how completely he'd stripped me bare with nothing but words. "Why?" I whispered. "Why do you know these things?" For the first time, something like emotion crossed his face. Not quite a smile. Not quite satisfaction. Something hungrier. Because you're mine to know, he said simply. The certainty in those words made my stomach drop. Not a question. Not a request. A statement of fact, delivered as if he were commenting on the weather. I don't even know you, I breathed. Dante Caruso. He said it like I should recognize it, like the name itself should mean something. It didn't, or it shouldn't have. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a warning bell was ringing. I'd heard that name before, whispered in the shadows of the bar, mentioned in news reports I'd half listened to while getting ready for work. Caruso. The name connected to rumors of organized crime, of territory wars, of people who disappeared when they crossed the wrong lines. My legs felt weak. I need you to leave. No, he said calmly. You need me to stay. You just don't know it yet. Marcus, bless him, had finally noticed something was wrong. He'd set down his paper dragon and was looking between us with growing concern. Arya? Everything okay? Dante's head turned, slowly, deliberately, to face Marcus. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Whatever Marcus saw in his face made the color drain from his cheeks. He stood up so quickly his bar stool scraped against the floor, threw a 20 on the bar, and walked away without another word. Just like that. A regular customer, someone I'd laughed with moments ago, erased from the interaction by nothing more than a look. The power in that terrified me. Dante turned back to me, and now there was something almost like satisfaction in his expression. Better. You can't just... My voice cracked. I swallowed hard, tried again. You can't just come in here and I can do anything I want, he interrupted. And the scary thing was, he wasn't bragging. He was stating a fact. But what I want right now is very simple. I want you to stop smiling at other men. I want you to finish your shift, and I want you to come with me when you're done. I'm not going anywhere with you. Yes, he said, leaning forward slightly, his hands flat on the bar between us. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the flecks of gold in those impossibly dark eyes. You are. Because your mother's treatment isn't covered by insurance anymore. Because your landlord called your employer today to verify your employment. Because you're drowning, Arya. And I'm offering you a life raft. I don't need your help. Everyone needs help, he countered. The question is whether you're smart enough to take it when it's offered. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. Without thinking, I pulled it out. A text from Mercy General. Payment required for continued treatment. Please contact billing immediately. When I looked back up, Dante was watching me with that same unsettling intensity. He'd known, somehow, he'd known the text was coming. Had probably arranged for it to come right now, at this exact moment, when I was already off balance and afraid. What do you want from me? I asked. And I hated how defeated I sounded. His expression softened, just barely. Just enough to make him look almost human. Almost. Everything, he said quietly. But we'll start with dinner. Tomorrow night. 7 o'clock, I'll send a car. And if I say no? He straightened, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. You won't. Then he was moving away, his security falling into step around him. The crowd seemed to exhale collectively as he passed through it, heading toward a private booth in the back where men in expensive suits waited. Business. This entire encounter had been a detour in his evening, barely worth his time, yet somehow it had tilted my entire world on its axis. I stood there, gripping the bar, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. My hands shook as I tried to pour myself water, the glass rattling against the pitcher. What had just happened? Who was Dante Caruso, really? And why in God's name had he decided I belonged to him? My phone buzzed again. Not a text this time. A bank notification. A deposit. $50,000. I nearly dropped the glass, scrolled up to check the sender, anonymous transfer. But I knew. Of course I knew. The message that followed was simple. For your mother. No strings attached. But I'll still see you tomorrow at 7. No strings attached. The biggest lie I'd ever been told, wrapped up in the prettiest bow. Because men like Dante Caruso didn't do anything without strings. and I had just felt the first one wrap around my wrist, soft as silk and strong as steel. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, Dante Caruso, with his predator's gaze and that voice like smoke and whiskey, telling me I belonged to him as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The $50,000 sat in my account like a bomb waiting to detonate, and I'd stared at my phone screen until the numbers blurred, trying to convince myself to send it back. But I didn't. Because at 6:30 that morning, my mother's nurse called to tell me they'd scheduled her for the new treatment protocol, the one her doctor had recommended months ago. The one insurance had denied, the one that might actually work. Someone took care of the payment, Nurse Sharon said, her voice warm with relief. An anonymous donor. Your mother's going to get the help she needs, sweetheart. I'd sat on the edge of my bed in my threadbare pajamas, surrounded by the peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceiling of my corner apartment, and cried. Not pretty tears, ugly, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest, where I'd been holding back the fear for so long it had calcified into something hard and permanent. He'd bought me. That's what the money meant. Dante Caruso had looked at my life, identified the exact pressure point that would make me crumble, and pressed down with surgical precision. And the worst part? It had worked. By the time 7 o'clock rolled around the next evening, I'd convinced myself a dozen times to stand him up. I'd typed out messages I never sent. I can't do this. Leave me alone. I'll pay you back. Each one deleted before I could hit send, because we both knew I couldn't pay him back, not in this lifetime. Not in 10 lifetimes. I stood in front of my closet, if you could call the small alcove with a tension rod a closet, and stared at my meager options. Everything I owned was cheap, worn, bought from discount stores or thrift shops. Nothing appropriate for wherever Dante Caruso planned to take me. Nothing that wouldn't immediately broadcast exactly how far beneath him I was on the social ladder. Finally, I settled on a simple black dress I'd bought for my mother's church fundraiser 2 years ago. It was plain, modest, the fabric slightly pilled at the seams, but it was the best I had. I paired it with my only heels, black pumps with a scuff on the left toe I'd tried to cover with a Sharpie, and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked terrified. My green eyes were too wide, my face too pale beneath the minimal makeup I'd applied with shaking hands. I'd left my dark hair down, hoping it would hide how much my hands trembled when I tried to style it. The girl staring back at me looked exactly like what she was. A woman in over her head, about to walk willingly into a trap she didn't understand. The knock on my door came at precisely 7 o'clock. My heart lurched into my throat. I'd expected a text, maybe a honk from the street below. Not this. Not someone at my door, in my space, in the last place that felt like mine. I opened it slowly, keeping the chain lock engaged. The man on the other side wasn't Dante. He was one of the security guards from the bar, the taller one, with salt and pepper hair and a face that had seen things I probably didn't want to imagine. He stood with military posture, his hands clasped in front of him, patient and professional. "Miss Arya," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Mr. Caruso sent me to escort you. I'm Marco. I can meet him wherever, Mr. Caruso doesn't allow his guest to navigate the city alone after dark," Marco interrupted smoothly, as if he'd given this speech before. "For your safety, please, take your time. I'll wait." His guests. The phrasing made my stomach twist. How many women had Marco escorted to Dante? How many had stood where I was standing, feeling this same mixture of dread and inevitability? I grabbed my purse, a Target clearance find from 3 years ago, and stepped into the hallway, locking the door behind me with fingers that wouldn't quite steady. Marco moved ahead of me down the stairs, checking each landing before allowing me to continue. It should have felt ridiculous, this level of security for someone like me in my rundown building. Instead, it felt ominous. The car waiting at the curb made my breath catch. It was a black Mercedes S-Class, sleek and gleaming under the streetlights, tinted windows reflecting the shabby neighborhood back at itself like a dark mirror. Marco opened the rear door, and I hesitated for just a moment. One last chance to run, to choose differently, before the memory of my mother's medical bills pushed me forward. The interior smelled like leather and money. Soft ambient lighting illuminated cream-colored seats that looked like they'd never been sat on. A privacy screen separated me from the driver, and I was grateful for it. I didn't want to see another face, another person who worked for Dante and knew exactly what I was walking into. We drove through the city in silence. I watched my neighborhood disappear outside the window, the bodega where I bought discount groceries, the laundromat where I spent Sunday mornings, the bus stop where I waited in rain and snow, all of it falling away as we moved into areas I'd only ever seen in magazines. Tree-lined streets, historic brownstones, restaurants with valet parking and waiting lists measured in months. We stopped in front of a building that didn't advertise itself. No sign, no crowd, just a discreet entrance with a doorman who opened my car door before Marco could. "Miss," the doorman said, offering his gloved hand. I took it, stepping out onto a sidewalk that probably cost more per square foot than my entire apartment. The building facade was understated elegance. Old brick, iron railings, gas lamps that cast warm pools of light. Through the glass doors, I could see marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Marco guided me inside with a hand that never quite touched my back, just hovered there, a reminder of his presence. The lobby was hushed, temperature-controlled, smelling of lilies and expensive candles. My cheap heels clicked too loudly against the marble, announcing my intrusion into this world where I didn't belong. We rode an elevator to the top floor. Of course it was the top floor, and my ears popped with the altitude. When the doors opened, they revealed a private foyer with only one door. Marco pressed the doorbell, and I fought the urge to run back into the elevator. The door opened. Dante stood framed in the doorway, and the sight of him stole whatever composure I'd managed to scrape together. He'd traded the suit for something slightly less formal, but no less expensive. Charcoal slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and decorated with what looked like the edge of a tattoo. His dark hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd run his fingers through it, and those devastating eyes locked onto me with an intensity that made my knees weak. "Aria," he said, my name a greeting and a claim all at once. "You came." Did I have a choice? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. A flash of defiance I couldn't quite suppress. Something flickered in his expression, approval maybe, or amusement. "There's always a choice," he said quietly. "You're here because you chose to be. Remember that." He stepped aside, and I moved past him into the apartment, hyper-aware of how close we were in the doorway, how the bergamot and cedar scent of him surrounded me. Marco didn't follow. The door closed behind me, with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. The apartment was exactly what I'd expected, and somehow more. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city, the view worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. The interior was all clean lines and expensive minimalism. Dark wood, leather furniture, art on the walls that I suspected wasn't reproduction. Everything perfect, everything controlled, like him. "Would you like something to drink?" Dante asked, moving toward a bar cart that probably held liquor older than I was. "Wine? Something stronger?" "Water is fine." I didn't trust myself with alcohol. Didn't trust what I might say or do if I let my guard down even a fraction. He poured water into crystal glasses. Even that felt like a statement, and handed one to me. Our fingers brushed in the exchange, and I jerked back as if burned. He noticed, of course. Those dark eyes noticed everything. "You're afraid of me," he observed, not a question. Shouldn't I be? Probably. He took a sip of his own water, watching me over the rim of the glass. "But you're here anyway. That takes courage. That takes desperation," I corrected, my voice steadier than I felt. "There's a difference." "Is there?" He moved toward the windows, and I found myself following, drawn into his orbit like a moon around a planet. Most courageous acts are born from desperation. The soldier who runs into fire to save his comrade. The mother who lifts a car off her child. You, accepting help from a stranger because someone you love needs you to be brave. "You're not helping me," I said, joining him at the window but keeping careful distance between us. "You're buying me. Let's not pretend this is altruism." His reflection in the glass smiled. Actually smiled. and it transformed his face from beautiful to breathtaking. "I like that you're not stupid," he said. "Most people in your position would play grateful. They'd simper and thank me and pretend they don't understand exactly what this is. And what is this exactly?" He turned to face me fully, and suddenly the distance I'd maintained felt inadequate. He wasn't touching me, but I felt trapped anyway, pinned by the weight of his attention. "This is me giving you what you need in return. You give me what I want, which is you. Simple, direct, devastating. Your time, your company, your attention when I require it. Nothing you're not willing to give, Arya. I'm not a monster." "No?" I challenged, forcing myself to meet his gaze, because monitoring my bank account, learning my schedule, knowing where my mother is being treated, that sounds pretty monstrous to me. "That sounds like due diligence," he countered. "I don't invest in things I haven't researched. And make no mistake, you are an investment." The words should have made me angry. Should have sent me running for the door. Instead, they just made me tired. "Why me?" I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. "I'm nobody. I work in a bar. I can barely afford to eat. What could you possibly want with someone like me?" His hand came up, and I froze as he brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. The touch was gentle, almost tender, and that made it more frightening than if he'd grabbed me. "You remind me of someone," he said quietly. "Someone I couldn't save. Someone who deserved better than the hand life dealt her. I'm not your redemption project." "No," he agreed, "you're not. But maybe you're my second chance." A timer went off in another room. The kitchen, I assumed. Dante's expression shifted, the vulnerability I'd glimpsed vanishing behind that controlled mask. "Dinner is ready. Come." It wasn't a request. The dining room was intimate, a table set for two near another wall of windows, candles flickering in crystal holders. Food already plated in portions that looked like art. He pulled out my chair with the practiced courtesy of someone raised with old-world manners, then took his own seat across from me. I stared at the plate, some kind of pasta with seafood. The presentation so perfect I felt guilty disturbing it. "You cooked this?" I asked, unable to hide my surprise. "I did." He picked up his fork, completely at ease. "I don't trust people in my personal space. Not with food, not with anything that matters. You learn to be self-sufficient in my line of work." "And what exactly is your line of work?" His eyes met mine over the candlelight, dark and unreadable. "Import-export," he said with a slight smile that told me he knew I didn't believe him. "Family business, very traditional." "Traditional," I repeated, taking a small bite of pasta that melted on my tongue despite my nerves. "Is that what we're calling it? What do you think we should call it?" I think," I said carefully, setting down my fork, "that men with armed guards and private apartments and the resources to drop $50,000 without blinking aren't usually importing legitimate goods." "You're right," he said, surprising me with his honesty. "I'm not." "But knowing that doesn't change your situation, does it? Your mother still needs treatment. Your landlord still wants his money. You still need help that no one else is offering. So I should just accept it? Accept you? Accept whatever this arrangement is?" "Yes." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with that unnerving intensity. "Because the alternative is watching your mother die while you work yourself into an early grave trying to save her. And for what? Pride? Principles? Those things don't keep people alive, Arya. Money does. Power does. And right now, I have both." I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he was wrong, that there were things more important than survival at any cost, but the words stuck in my throat because he wasn't wrong. Not really. I'd been drowning for months, and he'd thrown me a rope. That the rope had thorns didn't make it any less necessary. "What happens after dinner?" I asked instead. "I take you home," he said simply. "Marco drives you back to your apartment. You go to work tomorrow at the bar, same as always. The only difference is that now, when I come in, you smile at me instead of other men. You save your attention for someone who's earned it. By paying for it. By caring enough to pay for it," he corrected. "There's a difference." We ate in loaded silence after that, The clink of silverware against china, the only sound besides the muted city noise filtering through the windows. The food was incredible, clearly expensive ingredients prepared with skill, but I could barely taste it. My mind was too busy trying to understand the man across from me, trying to find the angle, the trap, the moment when the other shoe would drop. "You keep waiting for me to hurt you," Dante observed, setting down his wine glass. "I can see it in your eyes. Every time I move, you flinch. Every time I speak, you brace yourself. Can you blame me?" "No." He stood, moving around the table with that predatory grace, and I forced myself not to shrink back as he stopped beside my chair. "But I need you to understand something, Arya. I don't hurt what's mine. I protect it. Jealously. Viciously. No one touches what belongs to me. Not without consequences." He leaned down, his hands bracing on the arms of my chair, caging me without touching me. This close, I could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the cedar and danger that clung to him like a second skin. "And you are mine now," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear, "whether you've accepted it yet or not. The moment I saw you laughing at that bar, smiling at someone who didn't deserve the gift of your attention, that was the moment you became mine. Do you understand? I should have said no, should have pushed him away, should have run. Instead, I heard myself whisper, yes." His smile was small, satisfied, and absolutely terrifying in its possessiveness. "Good girl." Then he straightened, offering his hand. "Come. I'll show you the view from the balcony before Marco takes you home." I took his hand. God help me. I took his hand and let him lead me deeper into the beautiful cage he was building around me, one expensive gesture at a time. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of contradictions that left me feeling like I was living 2 separate lives. By day, or rather by night, I was still just Arya, still pulling shifts at the Velvet Room, still pouring drinks and wiping down tables, still taking the bus home in the early morning hours with aching feet and the smell of spilled liquor clinging to my clothes. My coworkers noticed nothing different. My regulars still ordered their usual drinks. The world kept spinning as if nothing fundamental had shifted, but it had. Because now, 3 or 4 times a week, Dante came to the bar. He never announced himself, didn't need to. I always felt him before I saw him. That electric shift in the atmosphere, the way conversations seemed to lower in volume, the instinctive parting of the crowd. He'd take the same corner booth, the one with a clear view of all the exits, and his security would flank the entrance while he sat with his back to the wall, watching me work, just watching. It should have been creepy, should have made my skin crawl the way other men's stares sometimes did, hungry and entitled and demanding. But Dante's attention felt different, heavier, like he was cataloging every movement I made, every smile I gave to a customer, every word I exchanged with my coworkers, measuring them, weighing them, deciding if they deserved even that small piece of me, and God help anyone who got too friendly. Marcus never came back. Neither did Tom, the investment banker who used to chat about the stock market while nursing his scotch. Or David, the artist who'd once asked if he could sketch me during my break. They all just disappeared from my life, replaced by customers who kept their eyes down, and their interactions brief whenever Dante was in the building. The other bartender, Jenny, noticed. "What's with the suit in the corner?" she asked one night during a lull, jerking her chin toward Dante's booth. "He's here like every other day, just staring at you. Should I call someone?" "No," I said quickly. Too quickly. It's fine. He's harmless." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. Dante Caruso was many things, but harmless wasn't one of them. Jenny raised an eyebrow but didn't push. "Well, if he's bothering you, say the word. Tony's got a bat under the register." I almost laughed at the image of our 50-year-old manager going up against Dante and his security team with a baseball bat. Almost. Instead, I just nodded and went back to mixing drinks, hyper-aware of those dark eyes tracking my every move from across the room. The pattern was always the same. Dante would arrive, claim his booth, and sit in silence for an hour or 2. He never ordered more than a single glass of whiskey that he barely touched, never spoke to anyone except his security, who would occasionally lean in to whisper reports that made his jaw tighten or his eyes narrow. Business, I assumed. The kind that happened in shadows and ended with people disappearing. Then, at some point during my shift, his phone would light up. He'd glance at it, stand, and leave without a word, without looking back, as if I was just another piece of furniture he was keeping an eye on. It drove me crazy, because on the nights he didn't come to the bar, Marco would appear at my apartment at precisely 8 o'clock with an invitation I couldn't refuse. "Mr. Caruso requests your company for dinner." Those evenings were different, intimate, dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with guns or security teams. Dante would cook. Always something elaborate, always perfectly executed. We'd eat at that same table overlooking the city, candles flickering between us, and he'd ask me questions. Not the shallow getting-to-know-you questions of a first date, but deeper things. What did I dream about? What made me laugh? What was my earliest memory? What would I do if money wasn't an object? And somehow, impossibly, I'd answer him. Maybe it was the wine. He always poured expensive bottles I'd never tasted before, rich and smooth and dangerously easy to drink. Maybe it was the isolation of that apartment high above the city, where the real world felt very far away. Or maybe it was just the intensity of his attention, the way he listened like every word I said mattered, like he was memorizing me the same way he'd memorized my schedule, and my debts and my fears. He told me things too, small things, carefully chosen. He'd grown up in Italy, moved to the States when he was 12 after his father died. He had a younger sister he hadn't spoken to in 5 years. He hated seafood but cooked it anyway because the challenge interested him. He'd learned to shoot when he was 8 years old. That last one made me go quiet, my wine glass frozen halfway to my lips. "Does that scare you?" he'd asked, watching me with those unreadable dark eyes across the candlelight. "Yes," I'd admitted, because lying to Dante felt pointless. He always seemed to know the truth anyway. "Good," he'd said. "Fear keeps you careful. Careful keeps you alive." But despite the fear, or maybe because of it, I found myself looking forward to those dinners. Found myself checking the time at work, wondering if Marco would be waiting when I got home. Found myself disappointed on the nights my apartment stayed silent. That scared me more than anything Dante had told me about himself. It was a Thursday night, 2.5 weeks since our first dinner, when everything changed again. The bar was packed, some corporate event letting out early and flooding the velvet room with suits and expense accounts. I was 3 deep at the bar, barely keeping up with drink orders, when I felt it, that familiar shift in the air that meant Dante had arrived. I glanced up, catching sight of him moving through the crowd toward his usual booth, but tonight was different. Tonight, he wasn't alone. The woman with him was stunning, model tall with legs that went on forever, poured into a red dress that probably cost more than my car used to. Platinum blonde hair fell in perfect waves down her back, and even from across the room, I could see the glitter of diamonds at her throat and wrists. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world, her manicured hand resting possessively on Dante's arm. Something sharp and ugly twisted in my chest. Jealousy. Hot and immediate and absolutely ridiculous because I had no claim on Dante Caruso. No right to feel anything about who he brought to bars or what he did with his time when I wasn't around. He'd bought my compliance with his money, not my affection, not my heart. But watching her lean in to whisper something in his ear, watching him nod and guide her into the booth with his hand on the small of her back, it felt like swallowing glass. "Aria, I need 3 martinis and a whiskey sour," Jenny called, snapping me back to reality. I forced myself to focus on the drinks, on the mechanics of measuring and pouring and shaking. Don't look at his booth. Don't wonder who she is. Don't care. But I did look. Couldn't help it. The woman, whoever she was, sat close to Dante, her body angled toward his, her laugh carrying over the ambient noise. Beautiful and sophisticated, and perfectly suited to a man who wore power like a second skin. Everything I wasn't. Everything I could never be, even if I wanted to. Dante's security team looked relaxed, which told me she wasn't a threat. Someone known. Someone approved. Someone who belonged in his world in ways I never would. I turned back to the bar, my hands shaking slightly as I garnished the martinis. "You okay?" Jenny asked, touching my shoulder. You look like you've seen a ghost. Fine, I managed, just tired. The lie sat heavy on my tongue, but I pasted on a smile and delivered the drinks, then threw myself into serving the surge of customers with a focus that bordered on desperation. Anything to keep from looking at that booth. Anything to ignore the sick feeling in my stomach. An hour passed. The crowd started to thin. I'd almost convinced myself I could make it through the night without falling apart when I felt someone approach the bar. Not Dante. The woman. Up close, she was even more beautiful. The kind of beautiful that came from expensive salons and personal trainers and dermatologists on speed dial. Her makeup was flawless, her perfume subtle and clearly designer. And when she smiled at me, it didn't reach her cold blue eyes. Vodka cranberry, she said, her voice smooth and cultured. Top shelf. I nodded, reaching for the bottle with hands that I willed to stay steady. As I poured, I felt her watching me with the same calculating attention Dante often used. Measuring, assessing. So you're Arya, she said. And it wasn't a question. My stomach dropped. I'm sorry. Do I know you? Not yet. But Dante's told me about you. She accepted the drink I slid across the bar, taking a delicate sip. I'm Isabel, Dante's fiancée. The word hit me like a physical blow. Fiancé. Of course he had a fiancée. Men like Dante Caruso didn't stay single. They had beautiful, appropriate women waiting for them, women who understood their world and could navigate it without drowning. Congratulations, I heard myself say, the word hollow. Isabel's smile sharpened. He didn't tell you about me, did he? Typical. Dante hates complications. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that felt more like a threat. But let me make something very clear, darling. Whatever arrangement you have with him, whatever money he's given you, whatever promises he's made, it ends. Tonight. Walk away while you still can. I don't know what you're talking about, I said. But the words came out weak, unconvincing. Don't play stupid. It's beneath both of us. She set down her drink, diamonds catching the light. Dante has a habit of collecting strays. Pretty broken things he thinks he can fix, but they never last, sweetheart. He gets bored, moves on, and then where are you? Alone, with nothing but memories of what it felt like to have his attention for a little while. Each word was a carefully aimed dart, hitting marks I hadn't known were vulnerable. Because she was right. Everything she said was right. I was temporary, disposable, a project he'd abandon once the novelty wore off. I should get back to work, I managed, my throat tight. Good girl. Isabel picked up her drink, turning to leave. Then she paused, glancing back over her shoulder. Oh, and Arya. If you're smart, you'll take whatever money he's given you and disappear. Because Dante Caruso doesn't share, and neither do I. She walked back to the booth, sliding in next to Dante with a familiarity that spoke of years, not weeks. He said something I couldn't hear, and she laughed, pressing a kiss to his cheek that left a red lipstick mark on his skin. He didn't wipe it away. I turned back to the bar, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. Not here. Not where people could see. Not where he could see. The rest of my shift passed in a haze. I mixed drinks mechanically, smiled when appropriate, counted down the minutes until I could escape. Dante and Isabel stayed for another hour, then left together, her hand in his as they walked past the bar without a glance in my direction, as if I didn't exist, as if I'd never existed. When my shift finally ended at 2 a.m., I gathered my things with numb fingers and headed for the employee exit. The alley behind the bar was dark and smelled like garbage and rain, but it was blessedly empty. Or I thought it was. Arya. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Dante stood at the mouth of the alley, alone, his suit jacket unbuttoned and his hands in his pockets. The security team was nowhere in sight. Just him, backlit by the street lamps, his face half in shadow. What are you doing here? I asked, and I hated that my voice shook. Waiting for you. He moved closer, and I backed up instinctively until my shoulders hit the brick wall. You've been crying. I haven't. Don't lie to me. He was close now, close enough that I could see the tension in his jaw, the something dangerous flickering in his dark eyes. Isabel talked to you. What did she say? The truth. The words came out bitter. That I'm temporary, that you have a fiancé, that I should take the money and run before you get bored and throw me away like all the other broken things you've collected. His expression went absolutely still, deadly still. And you believed her. Why shouldn't I demanded, emotion finally breaking through my numbness. You never mentioned a fiancé, Dante. You show up at my job, you cook me dinner, you act like you own me, but you never said you belonged to someone else. So yes, I believed her. Because at least she was honest about what this is. You want honesty? His hand came up, palm flat against the wall beside my head, caging me in. Isabel is a political arrangement. Our families have been planning that engagement since we were children. It means nothing. She means nothing. Then why is she here? Because she heard about you, he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that made my pulse race. Because she's threatened by you in ways she's never been threatened by anyone else. Because you, Aria, with your cheap dress and your honest eyes and your stubborn pride, you matter more to me in 2 weeks than she has in 20 years. I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. I told her tonight that the engagement is over, Dante continued, his free hand coming up to cup my face with surprising gentleness. I told her I won't marry her. I won't marry anyone except the woman I choose. And I choose you. You can't. I can, he interrupted. I can do whatever I want. That's what power is, Aria, the ability to choose your own path, regardless of what anyone else says you should do. I'm not marrying you, I whispered, even as my body betrayed me by leaning into his touch. I don't even know you. Then let me help you know me. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, catching a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Let me show you that this, you and me, this is real. Not an arrangement. Not a transaction. Real. Nothing about this is real, I said. But the words lacked conviction. His smile was small, almost sad. Then why are you crying, Aria? Why do you care who I'm with if this means nothing to you? I didn't have an answer. Couldn't admit the truth, that somewhere between his possessive jealousy and his carefully cooked dinners, I'd started to fall. Started to care about a man who terrified me, who controlled me, who'd bought his way into my life and refused to leave. Come home with me tonight, he murmured, his forehead resting against mine. Not for dinner, not for show, just come home. Be with me. Let me prove this is more than you think it is. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to say no, to walk away, to remember that men like Dante Caruso didn't fall in love with girls like me. They consumed them and moved on. But standing there in that alley, with his hands gentle on my face and his breath warm against my lips, I couldn't remember why rationality mattered. Okay, I whispered. And just like that, I stepped willingly into the fire. The penthouse was different at 3 a.m, quieter somehow, more intimate. The city lights beyond the windows had dimmed to scattered gold against black velvet, and the silence felt thick enough to touch. Dante moved through the space with familiar ease, shrugging out of his suit jacket and draping it over a chair, loosening his tie with one hand while the other held mine, gently, as if I might bolt at any moment. Maybe I should have. Instead, I stood in his living room, still wearing my bar clothes that smelled like spilled liquor and stranger's cologne, feeling more out of place than ever in this world of marble and leather and floor-to-ceiling windows. Are you hungry? Dante asked, heading toward the kitchen. I could make something. At 3 a.m.? He glanced back, and there was something almost boyish in his slight smile. I don't sleep much. Occupational hazard. Food helps. I followed him into the kitchen, all stainless steel and black granite, probably bigger than my entire apartment. He moved with surprising comfort here, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator with the ease of someone who actually used this space regularly, not just for show. Sit, he said, nodding toward the island bar stools. I did, watching as he cracked eggs into a bowl, whisked them with practiced efficiency, added cream and herbs I couldn't name. His movements were precise, controlled, the same way everything about him was controlled. Even his rolled-up sleeves revealed forearms that were all lean muscle and tension, the edge of that tattoo I'd glimpsed before. Something dark and elaborate that disappeared beneath the fabric. "What is it?" I asked, nodding toward the ink. "The tattoo." He paused, glancing down at his arm as if he'd forgotten it was there. "Family crest. Everyone in the Caruso line gets it when they turn 18, a reminder of who we are, what we're bound to. Sounds more like a brand than a reminder." His eyes met mine, dark and unreadable. "Maybe it is. Does that bother you?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Everything about you bothers me, and nothing about you bothers me enough to leave." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or satisfaction. He returned to the eggs, pouring them into a heated pan where butter sizzled and popped. "You're more honest than most people I know. It's refreshing. Dangerous, but refreshing." "Dangerous how?" "Honesty invites honesty, and there are things about my life you're better off not knowing." He plated the omelet with the same precision he did everything else, adding toast and fruit with an artist's attention to presentation. Then he slid it in front of me along with silverware that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Eat." "You barely touched dinner earlier." I hadn't realized he'd noticed, but of course he had. Dante noticed everything. The omelet was perfect, fluffy and rich and flavored with herbs that tasted expensive. I ate slowly, hyper-aware of him watching me, of the intimacy of this moment. Just the two of us in his kitchen in the dead of night, sharing food in silence, and something that felt dangerously close to domesticity. "Tell me about Isabel," I said finally, setting down my fork. "The real story, not the version you gave me in the alley." Dante leaned against the counter, arms crossed over his chest. In the kitchen's softer lighting, with his tie gone and his shirt wrinkled, he looked younger, more human. "Our families arranged it when we were children. Her father controls the ports in New York. My family controls distribution. A marriage would unite territories, eliminate competition, make both families stronger. But you don't love her. I don't even like her," he said bluntly. "Isabel is ambitious, calculating, and cruel when it suits her. She wants the Caruso name and the power that comes with it. She doesn't want me. Not really." "And your family? They're okay with you breaking the engagement?" His laugh was short, humorless. "My family doesn't get a vote, not anymore. When my father died, I inherited everything. The business, the responsibility, the burden of all the choices he made before I was old enough to understand them. I've spent the last 8 years cleaning up his mistakes, rebuilding what he nearly destroyed. I've earned the right to make my own decisions. Even if those decisions start a war, even then." He moved closer, bracing his hands on either side of me on the counter, caging me in without quite touching. "But it won't come to that. Isabel's father is a businessman first. He'll be angry, but he'll adjust, find another alliance, another marriage to cement his power. That's how this world works. Sounds lonely. It is." His voice dropped, intimate and raw. "Until it isn't. Until you find someone who looks at you and doesn't see the power or the money or the name. Someone who sees just you." My breath caught. "I barely know you, Dante. How can I see you when you won't let me?" "Then ask." His eyes searched mine, intense and almost desperate. "Ask me anything. I'll tell you the truth. All of it. No more games." It was an offering I hadn't expected. A vulnerability that felt more dangerous than any weapon. I swallowed hard, choosing my words carefully. "The night we met, at the bar, you said I was yours, that you'd decided it the moment you saw me. Why?" He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was trying to decide how much to reveal. Finally, he reached out and traced the curve of my cheekbone with one finger, the touch achingly gentle. "You were laughing," he said softly. "Really laughing, not the fake laugh people use when they're trying to impress someone or get something. And for just a second, you looked free, happy, like the weight of the world wasn't crushing you." His hand dropped. "My mother used to laugh like that before my father's choices destroyed her." before the life we lead took everything good about her and ground it down to nothing. Understanding hit me like a freight train. I remind you of her. No. His voice was fierce. You remind me of what she could have been if someone had protected her, if someone had seen what was happening and stepped in before it was too late. He exhaled slowly. I was 8 years old when she died. Suicide. Though the family called it an accident. I found her. I was the one who... He stopped, his throat working. I reached out instinctively, covering his hand with mine. You don't have to. I want to. He turned his hand over, lacing our fingers together. I need you to understand. I'm not a good man, Arya. I've done things that would make you run screaming if you knew the details. But I protect what's mine, obsessively, violently, because I know what happens when you don't. When you let the world take and take until there's nothing left. Tears burned behind my eyes. For him. For his mother. For the child who'd found her and had been shaped by that trauma into the dangerous man standing in front of me. I'm not her, I whispered. I'm not going to break, Dante. Everyone breaks eventually. His free hand came up to cup my face. But maybe, if I'm careful enough, if I give you everything you need, you won't break the way she did. Maybe I can do it right this time. I'm not a second chance, I said, even as I leaned into his touch. I'm just me, broken in my own ways, drowning in my own problems. You can't save me and redeem yourself at the same time. Watch me. Then he was kissing me, not gentle, not careful, like a man drowning and I was air. His mouth claimed mine with a hunger that stole my breath, one hand tangling in my hair while the other pulled me closer, eliminating the space between us. I gasped against his lips, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss until I couldn't think, couldn't breathe, could only feel. This was dangerous, reckless. Everything I'd sworn I wouldn't do, I kissed him back anyway. My hands found his shoulders, his neck, threading through his dark hair and pulling him closer even though there was no closer to get. He tasted like mint and whiskey, and something uniquely him, and I wanted more. Wanted everything he was offering and everything he wasn't. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. Stay, he murmured. Tonight, just sleep. Nothing else. Just stay with me. I should have said no. Should have called a car, gone back to my shabby apartment, put distance between myself and this man who was rapidly becoming my entire world. Okay, I whispered instead. He led me to his bedroom, all dark wood and soft lighting, and a bed that looked like it could sleep 5 people comfortably. He disappeared into what I assumed was a closet and returned with a t-shirt, soft and worn, offering it to me without a word. I changed in the bathroom, splashing water on my face and staring at my reflection. My lips were swollen from his kiss. My eyes were too bright, fever bright, like I was coming down with something. Maybe I was. Maybe Dante Caruso was a virus in my bloodstream, and I was too far gone to fight the infection. When I emerged, he was already in bed, wearing just sleep pants, the covers pulled back in invitation. I climbed in beside him, hyper-aware of his proximity, of the heat radiating from his body, of how small I felt in this massive bed. Come here, he said quietly. I moved closer, and his arm came around me, pulling me against his chest. I could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, feel the rise and fall of his breathing. He smelled like cedar and safety, which was insane because nothing about Dante Caruso was safe. Tell me something true, I whispered into the darkness, something you've never told anyone else. His hand stroked slowly through my hair, the gesture soothing and intimate. I'm terrified of losing you, he admitted, which is insane because I barely know you. But the thought of you walking away, of choosing someone else, of smiling at another man the way you smiled at that idiot at the bar, it makes me want to burn the world down. That's not healthy. I never claimed to be healthy. His arms tightened around me. But I'm yours, Arya. Completely. Possibly irreversibly. And I need you to decide if you can live with that. I was quiet for a long time, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. I don't know if I can, I finally said. But I don't know if I can walk away either. Then don't. His lips pressed against my hair. Stay? Figure it out as we go. Let me take care of you while you decide. That's not fair. You're bribing me with security and money and... Love, he interrupted quietly. I'm bribing you with love. Maybe it's twisted and possessive and not what you deserve. But it's real, Arya. More real than anything I've ever felt. My chest felt too tight. You can't love me. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you take extra shifts to pay for your mother's treatment. I know you cry in the bathroom at work when you think no one's listening. I know you put everyone else's needs before your own until there's nothing left for yourself. I know you're strong and stubborn and so fucking beautiful it hurts to look at you sometimes. A tear slid down my cheek, absorbed by his t-shirt. This is crazy. Probably. His voice was drowsy now, sleep creeping in at the edges. But you're still here. That has to mean something. It did. I just wasn't ready to admit what. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of his body and the security of his arms lull me toward sleep. Tomorrow, I'd worry about the consequences. Tomorrow, I'd figure out what I was doing with a mafia boss who'd decided I belonged to him. Tomorrow, I'd deal with reality. Tonight, I let myself have this. The fantasy of being protected, cherished, chosen, even if it was built on a foundation of danger and obsession and beautiful lies. Even if I was falling in love with a man who might destroy me, even if part of me wanted him to. I woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, I didn't know where I was. The bed was too soft, the sheets too expensive, the room too bright. Then memory crashed back. Dante. The kiss, his confession in the darkness, falling asleep in his arms while my rational mind screamed warnings I'd chosen to ignore. I sat up quickly, heart pounding, and found myself alone in the massive bed. The space beside me was cool, the indent of his body the only evidence he'd been there at all. Voices drifted from somewhere in the apartment, low, serious, speaking rapid Italian that I couldn't understand. I climbed out of bed, still wearing his t-shirt, and padded barefoot toward the sound. The hallway opened into the living room where Dante stood by the windows, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing sharply as he spoke. He dressed in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, looking every inch the dangerous businessman I'd first encountered at the bar. But when his eyes landed on me, everything about him softened. He said something quick into the phone, then ended the call, crossing the room in 3 long strides. You're awake. I was about to check on you. What time is it? Almost 11. His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from my face, the gesture so natural it made my chest ache. I let you sleep. You needed it. 11. I'd slept for 8 hours straight, the longest stretch in months. No nightmares about medical bills or eviction notices. No waking in a panic at every unfamiliar sound. Just rest. I made coffee, Dante said, guiding me toward the kitchen. And I had breakfast delivered. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I ordered everything. He wasn't exaggerating. The kitchen island was covered with food. Pastries, fruit, eggs, bacon, waffles, yogurt, enough to feed a small army. The casual excess of it should have bothered me. Instead, I found myself fighting back tears at the simple thoughtfulness of the gesture. This is too much, I managed. Nothing is too much for you. He poured coffee into an elegant mug, added cream without asking how I took it, because of course he already knew, and handed it to me. Eat. Then we need to talk. Those 4 words sent dread spiraling through my stomach. About what? About keeping you safe. His expression was serious now. The softness replaced by something harder, more dangerous. Isabel told her father about us last night. Antonio Rossini isn't happy about the broken engagement. I set down the coffee, my hands suddenly shaking. What does that mean? It means he might try to use you to get to me, to force my hand or punish me for the disrespect. Dante's jaw tightened. I won't let that happen, but it requires changes, precautions. What kind of precautions? He moved to the counter, retrieving a folder I hadn't noticed before. First, you're moving out of your apartment. Today. I've already had your belongings packed and moved to a secure location, a property I own in a better neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, if that makes you feel better. Your own space within mine. You packed my apartment without asking me? I sent people I trust, Everything you own is safe, inventoried, waiting for you. He opened the folder, spreading papers across the counter. Second, you're not going back to the Velvet Room. I've spoken with your manager. You're on indefinite paid leave. You can't just... I can, and I did. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. That bar is too public, too exposed. Anyone looking for leverage against me will start there. I won't risk it. Anger flared hot in my chest, cutting through the fear. So what am I supposed to do? Sit in some apartment you own, wearing clothes you bought, eating food you provide, like some kept woman? You're supposed to stay alive, he shot back, his control finally cracking. You're supposed to let me protect you from the consequences of choosing me. Because that's what this is, Arya. You stayed last night. You kissed me back. You chose this, chose us. And now I need to keep you safe from what that choice means. I didn't choose to be a prisoner. You're not a prisoner. He closed the distance between us, his hands framing my face with surprising gentleness, despite the intensity in his eyes. You can leave any time you want. Walk out that door. Go back to your old life. Forget this ever happened. I won't stop you. But if you stay, if you choose to be with me, then you accept my protection, all of it. Because I cannot lose you. I won't survive it. The rawness in his voice undid me. This wasn't about control, not really. It was about a man who'd watched his mother die, who'd spent his whole life unable to save the people he loved, now desperate to protect the one person who'd made him feel something real. What about my mother? I asked quietly. Her treatments. If I'm in hiding, already handled. I've arranged private care, the best doctors, a suite at Mercy General that's monitored 24/7 by my security. No one gets near her without clearance. He pulled papers from the folder. And this. I had my lawyers draw it up this morning. I looked down at the documents, legal papers, dense with text I could barely understand. But certain words jumped out. Beneficiary, trust fund, medical expenses, full coverage. What is this? Insurance, Dante said simply. If something happens to me, your mother's care continues. The trust is in your name, untouchable by anyone else. Whether you stay with me or not, she's taken care of. For life. My vision blurred with tears. Why would you do this? Because I love you. He said it so simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Because you deserve to make your choice based on what you want, not what you need. Because I need you to know that keeping you is about wanting you, not trapping you. I stared at him. This beautiful, dangerous man who'd upended my entire life in a matter of weeks, who'd bought his way into my world and refused to leave, who was now offering me everything I needed while claiming it was a gift, not a cage. I'm scared, I whispered. Good. Fear keeps you careful. He echoed his words from weeks ago, but now they carried different weight. Be scared. Be angry. Be whatever you need to be. Just be it with me. Let me love you while you figure out if you can love me back. I already do. The admission fell from my lips before I could stop it. That's what terrifies me. I love you and I barely know you and everything about this is wrong and dangerous and he kissed me, swallowing the rest of my words. This kiss was different from last night's desperate hunger. This was a promise, a claim, a vow sealed with the press of lips and the thunder of our heartbeats. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. Then we figure it out together, one day at a time. You learn who I really am. I learn how to be what you need. We build something real out of this insane beginning. What if your world destroys us? Then we burn together. His smile was small, almost sad. But I'd rather burn with you than live safely without you. The next 3 months were a study in contradictions. Dante kept his word. The apartment he'd moved me into was beautiful. A 2-bedroom in a secure building with a doorman and cameras and enough space that I never felt trapped. My mother's care improved dramatically with the private suite and specialized treatments, and I visited her every day under Marco's watchful protection. But more than that, Dante let me in. He taught me to cook the elaborate meals he'd been making, standing behind me in the kitchen with his hands guiding mine, his patience endless when I made mistakes. He showed me the legitimate parts of his business, the import company that actually did import things, the real estate holdings, the investments that had nothing to do with the darker parts of his world. And slowly, carefully, he showed me the dark parts too. Not the violence, He kept that carefully separate, handled through people I never met, in places I never saw. But he told me the truth about his family's history, about the choices his father had made that Dante was still paying for, about the territory wars and the political alliances and the constant balancing act of maintaining power while trying to build something better. "I'm not my father," he told me one night, as we sat on the balcony of his penthouse, the city glittering below us. "I don't deal in drugs. I don't traffic people. I've been trying for 8 years to clean up what he left behind, to turn this family into something that can survive in the light. Can it?" I asked. "Can you ever really leave this life?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'm trying. For you. For the future I want with you." We had fights. Terrible, explosive arguments about his possessiveness, about the guards that followed me everywhere, about the fact that he'd eliminated every male friend I'd ever had from my life without apology. He was jealous, controlling, and utterly unrepentant about it, but he also listened. When I told him I needed space to breathe, he gave it. When I said the constant security made me feel like a prisoner, he scaled it back to 1 guard instead of 3. When I cried about missing the independence of my old life, he set up a bank account in my name and taught me how to invest, how to build my own security that didn't depend on him. "If you ever want to leave," he said, showing me the account statements, "you can. You'll never be trapped by money again." It was the most loving cage I'd ever experienced. Antonio Rossini made his move 3 months after I'd moved into Dante's world. A car bomb in the parking garage of one of Dante's properties, targeting a vehicle we'd been scheduled to use. We survived only because Dante's paranoia meant he never followed routines, never took the same car twice in a row. The retaliation was swift and brutal. I didn't see it, didn't want to know the details. But Dante came home that night with blood on his shirt and something cold in his eyes that made me understand exactly how dangerous he really was. "It's done," was all he said. "Rossini won't be a problem anymore." I should have been horrified, should have packed my bags and run. Instead, I held him while he showered, washing the evidence of violence down the drain, and understood that this was the price of loving Dante Caruso, the beautiful and the terrible, wrapped together so tightly they couldn't be separated. 6 months after that first night at the bar, Dante took me back to the Velvet Room, not to work, to celebrate. He'd bought the place, renovated it, transformed it into something that still had the same amber lighting and intimate atmosphere, but now felt safer, cleaner, better. Jenny still worked there, now as general manager with a salary that made her cry. Marcus had come back too, apologizing for running that first night, and we'd laughed about it over drinks while Dante watched with only mild jealousy. "I want you to have a choice," Dante said, standing with me at the bar where we'd first met. "You can work here if you want, manage it, or you can do something else entirely. Go to school, start a business, anything. I'll support whatever you choose." "What if I choose to just be with you?" I asked. "Is that allowed?" His smile was genuine, transforming his face from dangerous to devastating. "That's my first choice too, but you deserve more than just being someone's partner. You deserve your own dreams. Maybe my dream is building something with you," I said. "Something real. Something better than what came before." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and my breath caught. "Then build it with me. Officially. Permanently. Be my wife, Arya. Choose me every day for the rest of our lives." The ring was beautiful, a simple diamond that caught the light, elegant and understated and perfect, nothing like the ostentatious jewelry Isabel had worn. This was chosen for me, for who I actually was, not who someone wanted me to be. "Yes," I whispered. And then louder. "Yes." He slid the ring onto my finger and kissed me there in the bar where this had all begun, where I'd been just a tired bartender and he'd been a dangerous stranger who'd decided I was his. The crowd around us cheered, Jenny and Marcus and all the people who'd watched our strange love story unfold, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, truly chosen, truly home. We married quietly 6 months later in a small ceremony with just our closest people. My mother was there, healthy enough to walk me down the aisle in a wheelchair, crying happy tears. Dante's sister came too, reconciling with him after years of estrangement, telling me later that she'd never seen her brother so genuinely happy. The life we built wasn't easy. Dante's world remained dangerous, requiring constant vigilance and sacrifice. But he kept his promise. He protected what was his with fierce devotion. He loved me with an intensity that sometimes scared me and sometimes saved me. And slowly, together, we transformed his family's legacy into something we could both live with. On our first anniversary, Dante cooked the same meal he'd made that first night. The omelet at 3 a.m. when I'd been too scared and confused to understand what was happening between us. "Do you regret it?" he asked as we ate at the kitchen island, our fingers intertwined on the counter. Saying yes that night, letting me into your life, I looked at him. This beautiful, dangerous man who'd seen me drowning and decided to save me, who'd loved me with such possessive devotion that I'd never felt alone again. And I smiled. "Not for a single second," I said truthfully. "You're the best mistake I ever made." His laugh was warm, genuine, the sound of a man who'd finally found something worth more than power, or money, or control. "And you're the only thing I ever got right." He leaned across the counter and kissed me. And in that kiss was everything we'd survived together. The fear and the danger, the obsession and the sacrifice, the beautiful cage that had become a home. We'd built something real from the ruins of 2 broken people. Something strong enough to withstand his world, and stubborn enough to last forever. Because that's what love was, I'd learned. Not the easy fairy tale version. The complicated, messy, sometimes terrifying reality of choosing someone every day despite the danger, of being chosen in return with the kind of fierce devotion that refused to let go. Dante Caruso had walked into my life as a possessive stranger who decided I belonged to him. And somehow, impossibly, he'd been right. I did belong with him. And he belonged with me. Forever had never sounded so perfectly dangerous.